Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out top 10 Beatles songs the Beatles hate. They hate Maxwell
Welcome to
Silverhammer?
Watch Mojo UK, and today we're looking at classic Beatles songs that various members of the band have said they didn't like over the years. Number 10,
Okay.
Mean Mr. Mustard.
I
Since the
love Mean
Beatles
Mr.
disbanded
Mustard.
in 1970, the most vocal critic of the group's back catalogue was John Lennon. He made his thoughts known about many of their songs, including lots of his own that he felt weren't up to his standards. Mean Mr. Mustard was one of them, written in 1968 and eventually turning
Well,
up on Abbey Road. But Lennon
it's
called
a
it,
fun song.
quote, a piece of garbage. Supposedly written about an article he read about a dirty old man putting cash in an unmentionable place, though that part of the story was changed in the lyrics to his nose.
He put money in his
Given
butt?
Lennon's disdain, it's surprising it turned up on Abbey Road at all. Number 9. Obla-dee, obla-da.
I love I love that song. I love that song.
Maybe the most maligned Beatles song of all.
Yo, I cruise the streets of LA blasting Obla Di Obla Da. You guys don't like it? I love that song. Maxwell Silverhammer and Me, Mr. Mustard, they're like fun, cute songs. I guess Obla Di Obla Da is kind of a fun, cute song. But I feel like it's a substantial hit song with a great message. Why'd they hate it?
Maybe the most maligned Beatles song of all time. Obla-dee, obla-da has its fair share of critics among even the most ardent fans. But for decades, stories have circulated that John Lennon hated Obla-dee with a passion.
John didn't like this song, Obla Di Obla Da. Am I correct?
Who says?
He supposedly called it more of McCartney's notorious
Thank you,
granny
Paul.
music.
Fanny music. Oh, granny music?
But decades on, and McCartney seemed to debunk this story, saying that Lennon was actually the one who came up with the song's piano intro and helped the rest of the band to finish it.
He liked it.
I think so, yeah.
But, though he wasn't a member, sound engineer Jeff Emmerich quit working for them during these sessions for the White Album, apparently because of the bad atmosphere while recording this tune.
That's interesting. Yeah, I read the engineer, Jeff Emmerich, he wrote a book called Here, There, and Everywhere, and it's surprising that the White Album had really bad atmosphere in the studio. People were not getting along, and yet they made one of their greatest albums. It is interesting because that album has a lot of individual songs that have each member's style. It's like their individual styles started becoming more individual. It's a great album. Obla Di Obla Da is a great song. I don't care what John Lennon says. John, you're wrong. And I know you're still alive and you're listening. You're watching right now.
Number 8. Good Morning, Good Morning.
Not my favorite.
This song from Sgt. Pepper was another written by Lennon that he never particularly liked. He called this one garbage at one point too. It's definitely one of the more forgettable songs on this masterpiece of an album, despite still having the record's trademark horns and some great guitar licks. It eventually descends into sound effects of animals making noises. According to Lennon, it was inspired by a cornflakes advert he happened to have been watching, which is probably why he was so dismissive of it. There are interesting things here, but it's not surprising that Lennon felt the way he did.
Good Morning, Good Morning. That's one of those songs that, by itself, it's kind of a head-scratcher, but in the context of the album, it really fits, because it introduces the reprise of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the reprise.
Number 7. Yesterday. It's always been up there as one of their greatest hits,
Yeah.
remaining at the top of the streaming charts decades on, and becoming, perhaps, the most covered song of all time.
Ah, brilliant.
But Lennon, again, voiced his dislike for this McCartney classic. He said that, quote, it doesn't say anything, and he never wished he'd written it,
Yeah, it
though
does.
admitting it is a beautiful song.
John.
Interestingly, Bob Dylan also supposedly didn't like the song, despite its immortal status in pop music today.
Who
Lennon
cares
would
about
go on
Bob
to
Dylan?
criticize Yesterday on How Do You Sleep, while also claiming that it was the only good song McCartney ever wrote.
Right.
Though, of course, the Beatles had only just split when he said that, and many blamed McCartney for how it happened.
John. Bob. You're wrong. It's one of the most beautiful songs ever written. Not just in the 60s, not just in the 20th century, ever. If that song was written back in the Celtic days, this would be a folk song that we all know. It's a beautiful song with a beautiful message of heartache, but come on now. I think John just had some sour grapes, a little jealousy. Bob was kind of envious that he didn't write that. Bob, give Paul his credit.
Number 6, 8 Days a Week. None of the Beatles were particularly fond of 8 Days a Week.
It's a great
Which could be
song.
why it was never released as a single here in the UK. It did soar to the top of the US charts, but
Yeah.
even that wasn't enough to convince the Beatles that the song was actually all that good.
Really?
They
I love
never
it.
wanted to play it live, though according to some, it was potentially going to be the lead single for the band's follow-up film to A Hard Day's Night, Help. That was until the song Help came along and renamed the album and the movie. It did eventually get a tie-in film though, as it was used as the title of a documentary about their early touring years.
Oh, that's right. Yep. I wonder why they didn't like that one. It's so quintessentially Beatlesy. And the lyrics are clever. 8 days a week. That's like a Ringoism. Ringo used to say these weird things that were derivative of figures of speech, but he would get it just a little bit wrong. 8 days a week. Brilliant. I'm surprised at that one. Probably more than all of them.
Number 5, Hold Me Tight. A very
Okay.
early track in their discography. This was actually written back in 1961, but its release was pushed back. This is a rare case of a Lennon-McCartney song that neither Lennon nor McCartney particularly liked, with McCartney openly calling it filler. Harsh words from him. Interestingly, during his years with Wings,
That's harsh
McCartney
words
would
from him.
reuse its name. Is this because he forgot he had already used it for an early Beatles tune? Or was it because he just had such a low opinion of Hold Me Tight that he didn't mind reusing the name, potentially overwriting its existence?
I love the bridge of the song. So, yeah, I remember the first time I heard Hold Me Tight and I loved it. I loved it. I couldn't believe it was not a single. The thing that I love about it is the bridge. Ringo goes to the toms, the verses are really happy, the verse and the chorus are really happy, and then the bridge gets kind of dark.
Number 4, She Said, She Said. It's likely that, so many years on, Paul McCartney no longer has such bad blood for this tune from Revolver, but it's well documented that he stormed out of the studio while they were recording it.
Right.
Though it was credited to the Lennon-McCartney partnership, just like all the songs the pair wrote, even if they were done separately, McCartney had almost no influence on it. He revealed that he didn't even play bass on the recording, and that George Harrison stepped in after he left. This was all because the song was inspired by the group's recent experiments with psychedelic substances, something McCartney was still against at that time.
Yeah, that's not my favorite song, but I think it's brilliant. The lyrics are really interesting, and I think it's an important step for them as songwriters. And for the engineer and the George Martin, the producer, I think it was a step forward for them, a step in that direction. I could see, I get that. It's not my favorite.
Number 3, Twist and Shout.
Really?
You'll likely know that this massively popular early Beatles single is a cover, though perhaps not why John Lennon wasn't a fan of their version originally.
There's so much energy in
He
it.
had no acrimony to the song itself, but his performance on it. At the time, he had a cold and almost
That's what was
destroyed
great
his
about it.
voice, though the result is absolutely iconic.
Yes.
It was recorded in just 2 takes at the end of a long 12-hour day of recording, and Lennon didn't, at first, like listening to it because of how much he had damaged his throat during the sessions. He did warm to it
It
eventually,
sounds
and it
awesome.
became a staple Beatles track.
John, that song's awesome. Excellent vocal performance. That's part of what was great about it, is it sounds like they're just having fun and they're in a club or at a performance where they're just with their friends and nobody cares that his voice is cracking, and that's what's great about it. So much energy comes through those raspy vocals. I disagree with this too. I'm disagreeing with most of these.
Number 2, Revolution 9. Lennon and Yoko Ono's soundscape, Revolution 9, is one of the closers on the White Album.
I will say, before he describes this song, I remember being in college and I would listen to music while I'm going to sleep, and I would put on disc 2 of the White Album, and I remember trying to fall asleep when Revolution 9 came on, and it was a little too scary. It freaked me out a little bit. So from then on, if I was listening to disc 2 of the White Album while going to sleep, I would program the track on the CD player so that it skipped Revolution 9, just because it's creepy. But also this Revolution 9 is a huge step forward with the idea of what could be considered a song on an album. It's a work of art.
Clocking in at over 8 minutes long, McCartney wasn't involved in its creation whatsoever. In fact, he wasn't even in the country. By Geoff Emmerich's account, when he got back, he tried to convince John to leave Revolution 9 off the White Album entirely, something Lennon was dead against. McCartney failed,
it's jarring,
and the experimental track appeared next to last on the second LP of the album, still credited to Lennon-McCartney. It remains a controversial piece in the Beatles' back catalogue. Should it ever have been released as a Beatles song at all, or kept for John and Yoko?
See, I think if there was no Revolution 9, there would be no Dark Side of the Moon. Revolution 9 instills fear in me in a way that only Dark Side of the Moon has done more strongly. That's the phrase I'm going with. It's not something I blast while I'm driving, you know? It's not that kind of thing.
Number 1. Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Right.
The song the Beatles themselves hated above all else, Maxwell's Silver Hammer may have been a contributor to their demise in 1970. A typically upbeat McCartney song, despite its dark subject matter, Maxwell was always one of Paul's favourites. He liked it so much that he insisted to his bandmates that it must be played and recorded in a certain way, which led to endless unpleasant sessions during the filming of Get Back. By the end, Lennon, Harrison and Starr all hated it, and never made their dislike a secret. The song was finished and appeared on Abbey Road, but it was never a single like McCartney so desperately wanted it to be.
A single?
Let us know in the comments which of these songs you think is underrated.
Yeah, I've always thought Maxwell's Silver Hammer is a strange third song for Abbey Road. I feel like it could have been put in the medley part of Abbey Road. Maybe Oh Darlin' would be track 3 instead. I do think the juxtaposition of the sound of that song, the polka-ish kind of vibe, paired up against the subject matter of this kid killing people with a hammer, I think that's really funny. I had heard of a few of these before this video that they didn't like them, but some of these I'm really surprised at. I'm surprised I didn't hear these stories before. Twist and Shout? Come on! Anyway, wow, really interesting video. I love the Beatles. I love all these songs, honestly. I don't hate any of them. But anyway, thank you guys for recommending this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.